Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman, a member of the Finance Committee. Now, they're going to release their details, presumably on Thursday. They're the counterparts of the House Ways and Means Committee. The senator from Ohio with us right now. Senator Portman, is your ultimate plan when it's, released to the public, presumably on Thursday, I guess, going to be markedly different than the House Ways and Means plan?
I think the structure will be very much the same, and it focuses on three things. One is middle-class tax relief, which is needed right now, Neil, particularly with the middle-class squeeze that's out there, higher costs for health care, higher costs for everything, and yet pretty flat wages. And second is getting this economy moving by providing relief for small businesses, providing a lower corporate rate. I just heard my friend Art Laffer talking, and when Ronald Reagan took the rate down to 34%, he did that because it was just below the average in the industrialized countries. Well, that's what the 20% is, and that's very important to do. And then finally, to level this playing field globally so we're not losing jobs and investment overseas, and that includes bringing back some of this $2.5 or $3 trillion that's locked up overseas. So this is exciting because it gives us the opportunity to give the economy a shot in the arm.
You say it's exciting, Senator, but I talk to a lot of people. If they're excited, they have a funny way of showing it. There's a lot of complaining and whining going on. A lot of people say, well, I'm not getting a tax cut. Many people say with, mortgage interest capped and,
Oh, come on.
No, well, I'm just telling you what they said. And then, in the expensive states like where in New York, California, Illinois, Massachusetts, where you can't deduct your state and local taxes, will that be a provision in the Senate measure as well?
Well, first of all, I think you'll like the Senate bill. It'll be very similar to the House bill in structure, and I commend the House for getting theirs through this week.
Including no deduction for state and local taxes?
I think there'll be no deduction for state and local taxes. That's something, should the federal government be subsidizing states for having higher taxes?
I don't think
so.
But
I think it's better to get the rates down.
Senators from those states, they're going to go ballistic.
Well, senators from those states need to look at the entirety of the package because it also lowers tax rates and it also provides a tax relief, $1.5 trillion in tax relief to a lot of individuals in their states. In fact, in every group of taxpayers, they call them, quintiles, there'll be tax relief. And it'll go all the way up to the top. But guess what? The top will still pay their share of the taxation, their burden they're paying now. It won't be a tax cut in that sense, but it won't be a tax increase for folks. And I think, look, it's very clear that we have a broken tax code. Everybody agrees with that. It needs to be simpler, which this is. It needs to be fair, which this is, particularly more focus on the middle class tax cuts. And finally, the business side is totally broken. Neil, you and I have talked about this so many times. It's just crazy that Congress has allowed this to happen. There's a study out recently showing that 4,700 companies that should be American are now foreign just over the last 13 years because we didn't go to this kind of tax system. And if we did this,
have any provisos in the Senate, Senator, that would require companies that do get a tax holiday or to bring this money back from overseas to hire workers, to expand plants and equipment? What if they just pour it into buying stock?
Well, but that's not necessarily what we're doing because we're not doing a holiday. What we're saying is actually there's what's called a deemed repatriation, meaning they got to pay to move to the international system.
Understood that. But what if they don't take advantage of that or do what you think they will do to get that?
Well, then just say going forward, then there's not a holiday. It's permanent repatriation like our other competitors do. So the other countries in the world say you're taxed where the income is earned. That's what we're going to say. So you can bring it back without penalty. And no, I don't think we should say to companies, we'd like you to invest here rather than there. We want them to invest in their business and invest in what they think will create the most efficient use of that capital. Will yours be
paid for, Senator? The rap against the House plan is the math doesn't add up. It's not paid for. It'll worsen the deficits over the next 10 years.
I think both of them will have the same approach, which is to say that out of a roughly $44 trillion in taxes we're going to have over the next 10 years, that there'll be a $1.5 trillion tax cut, but that's based on a very low projection of economic growth, 1.9%, which is what CBO says, despite 2 quarters of 3% growth, despite a 25-year average of 2.5% growth. So if you assume it'll be under 2.5, but better than 1.9, about 2.4, you'll actually see a reduction in the deficit because you'll see more revenue coming in.
That's the rap against the House, sir, is that they have squeezed, all of this, a $5 trillion tax cut into a $1.5 trillion budget, framework, and it's just not cutting it. It's not making it happen.
Well, I think it's a good structure overall, Neil, because it does focus on the pro-growth elements. We've talked about also immediate expensing, which is a huge deal in terms of economic growth. And I do think we'll have more than adequate growth to take care of the relatively small part, 1.5 out of 44 trillion. And also, we're assuming certain things like that the current extenders of taxes won't happen. They always happen. So that takes about $500 billion out of that alone. So I feel confident about it, and I think you'll like the Senate bill, and I think you'll see that as we go through this process, yeah, there'll be some partisanship and so on, but when you look at the facts, that this is good for middle-class families, it's also good for small businesses, it's also good to make our international companies competitive, and that's what we've got to do. If we don't do that, you know, right. we have abdicated our responsibility.
And you're confident that'll be the case?
I'm confident, and I look forward to talking to you about it when the details come out.
Same here.